On July 21st, 1996, a man who knew the jagged peaks of Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks better than almost anyone vanished into their shadows. Randy Morgenson was not an unprepared tourist. He was a seasoned ranger, a veteran who had dedicated 28 seasons to protecting visitors from the wilderness that ultimately swallowed him. His disappearance presents a haunting paradox. How could a wilderness expert, intimately familiar with every hidden gorge, disappear without a single trace in the environment he called home? To understand this mystery, one must understand the man. Randy was a fixture of the high-altitude wilderness, spending his summers patrolling the most isolated reaches of the park. He thrived in the backcountry, a term referring to the vast, remote, and undeveloped areas of a national park accessible only by foot or horseback. This was his sanctuary. Yet, despite his profound expertise, the majestic landscape he revered would soon become the site of an impenetrable enigma. The timeline of his vanishing is stark. In late July, Morgenson was stationed at Bench Lake, a high-elevation patrol cabin surrounded by breathtaking, unforgiving terrain. On the morning of his disappearance, he radioed dispatch to report he was leaving for a routine multi-day patrol. He left a handwritten note pinned to his tent, stating he was monitoring trail conditions. He packed his backpack, stepped into the wild, and was never heard from again. The environment surrounding Bench Lake is defined by its extreme elevation. Much of his route traversed the alpine zone, the harsh, high-altitude region above the tree line characterized by rocky terrain, sparse vegetation, and extreme weather fluctuations. In this domain, the air is thin, and the landscape is a labyrinth of boulder fields and steep ravines. It is deeply indifferent to human life, where a single misstep can transform a routine hike into a fight for survival. When Morgenson failed to make his scheduled radio check-ins, dread settled over the dispatch center. By July 25th, the realization that one of their own was missing triggered a massive response. Park officials launched extensive SAR operations, utilizing search and rescue teams comprised of helicopters, tracking dogs, and highly trained personnel. The hunters had become the searched. The teams were looking for a mentor who knew exactly what to do if he was lost or injured. The scale of the operation was unprecedented in California history. Searchers employed a rigorous grid search, a methodical tactic where personnel form a line and walk parallel to thoroughly comb a specific area for clues. But the Sierra Nevada is a vertical world of deep gorges. The teams scoured the drainages near his planned route, looking for any sign of his signature campfires. They found absolutely nothing. It was as if the mountains had simply erased him. Complicating the rescue efforts was the lingering severity of the winter prior. The high country in the summer of 1996 was still choked with heavy snowpack, obscuring paths and creating deadly hazards. Snow bridges, fragile arches of ice spanning deep, freezing creeks, were particularly treacherous. The searchers faced the same lethal obstacles that Morgenson would have encountered, making the physical act of looking for the missing ranger a perilous endeavor in its own right. As the physical hunt yielded no results, investigators examined the psychological landscape of the missing man. Park records indicate that Morgenson was enduring intense personal turmoil. He was facing a painful divorce, suffering from severe burnout, and had expressed feelings of deep despondency to close friends. This emotional fragility cast a dark shadow over the investigation. The question shifted from where he was to whether he had intended to be found at all. The possibility of a deliberate disappearance became a heavy burden among his colleagues. According to lead investigator Alden Nash, the search teams had to consider three agonizing theories. Had Morgenson suffered a fatal accident? Had he simply walked away to start a new life? Or had he chosen to end his life in the mountains? The lack of physical evidence meant no theory could be discarded. The wilderness offered no confirmation, leaving his fellow rangers grappling with terrifying thoughts. After weeks of exhausting work, the official operations were eventually scaled back. The massive influx of helicopters departed, leaving the high country to its usual quiet. The transition from active rescue to a limited recovery mission was a devastating blow. The men and women who had scoured the peaks returned to their posts, haunted by the empty landscape. The failure to locate an experienced peer shattered the illusion of safety that training usually provided. For the family left behind, the cessation of the active hunt marked the beginning of a prolonged limbo. His loved ones were trapped in a void of uncertainty. His sister, who had always admired his deep connection to nature, recounted the profound emptiness of those years. The absence of a body meant the absence of an ending. Every time a hiker reported abandoned gear, their hearts would fracture all over again, caught in a cycle of desperate anticipation. The Sierra Nevada continued its eternal cycles, oblivious to the human sorrow echoing at its base. Snows fell and melted, rivers raged and slowed, and the granite peaks stood like silent monoliths against the sky. The sheer indifference of the natural world is perhaps the most chilling aspect of such disappearances. The mountains do not keep secrets out of malice, they simply exist, vast and unyielding, absorbing human lives into their geology without a ripple. 5 long years passed. The missing ranger became a ghost story whispered around campfires, a cautionary tale for new recruits about the unforgiving wild. His fate seemed destined to remain one of the great, unsolved mysteries of the national park system. The lack of closure festered like an open wound. How could a man leave no trace? The sheer impossibility of his complete evaporation challenged everything the rescue community understood about tracking and survival. Most missing hiker cases begin at a known point of entry. Investigators typically search outward from the trailhead, the designated starting point of a hiking route where vehicles are parked and journeys officially begin. But Morgenson was already days deep into the wilderness when he vanished. There was no single point of departure to anchor the search, only an endless expanse of rugged terrain. This forced the original teams to guess his intentions across hundreds of square miles. The breakthrough, when it finally came, was entirely accidental. In July 2001, nearly exactly 5 years after the last radio transmission, a backcountry worker was patrolling the remote Window Peak drainage. This area was incredibly dense, a rugged gorge far off the established paths, known for its steep descents. While navigating the difficult terrain, the worker noticed something unnatural breaking the organic patterns of the creek bed. It was a fleeting glimpse of color in a world of gray rock. A specialized recovery team was immediately dispatched to the coordinates. What they found brought a sudden, heartbreaking end to the half-decade of speculation. Protruding from the icy water of the creek was a piece of standard-issue park equipment. Nearby, hidden beneath a cascade of water and debris, lay a distinctive hiking boot. The remains of the missing veteran had finally been located, resting in a deep, narrow gorge that had perfectly concealed him from the helicopters overhead. The location of the discovery painted a grim picture of his final moments. The gorge was a natural trap, a steep ravine that funneled water beneath the snowpack. Investigators deduced that Morgenson had likely been crossing a fragile snow bridge over the hidden creek. The ice, weakened by the summer thaw, had collapsed under his weight. He plummeted into the freezing water and dark rocks below, swallowed instantly by the very terrain he had spent his life navigating. The forensic analysis answered the most pressing question, but introduced a new layer of tragedy. Morgenson had suffered a severe, incapacitating break to his leg during the fall. He had not died instantly. Evidence suggested he had managed to pull himself out of the freezing water, attempting to survive. He turned his radio on, hoping for rescue, but the signal could not escape the gorge. It was a cruel, false summit, a term used when a climber believes they have reached the top, only to discover a higher peak still lies ahead, representing a crushing blow to hope. The realization that he had fought for his life dismantled the darker theories of intentional disappearance. He had not walked away, and he had not chosen to end his life. He was a victim of the wild, brought down by a routine crossing that he had likely made 100 times before. The profound vulnerability of the human body, even one hardened by decades of altitude and exposure, was laid bare. All his expertise could not save him from the ice. The recovery of his remains provided a somber, bittersweet closure for his loved ones and the Park Service. The agonizing theories of abandonment or suicide were finally put to rest, replaced by the stark reality of a fatal accident. His colleagues could finally mourn the man rather than the mystery. Yet, the knowledge of his suffering in that dark ravine added a heavy weight to their grief. The wait was over, but his lonely demise was a difficult truth. Today, the Window Peak drainage remains as wild and indifferent as it was in 1996. The waters still rush over the rocks, and the snow bridges still form and collapse with the changing seasons. There is no monument there, only the silent, sweeping majesty of the high country. The landscape holds the memory of his final struggle, a permanent testament to the unforgiving nature of the environment. It is a place demanding absolute respect, offering no second chances. The story of Randy Morgenson serves as a chilling reminder to anyone who steps off the pavement and into the wild. If the mountains can claim a man who knew their every mood, who spoke their language and respected their power, they can claim anyone. His legacy is etched into the granite of the Sierra Nevada, a haunting narrative that forces us to confront our own fragility. The wilderness is not a playground. It is a primal force, entirely outside human control. While the physical mystery of his location was solved, the deeper, unsettling questions remain. We can map the coordinates of his fall, but we can never truly map the silent, desperate hours he spent at the bottom of that gorge. The national parks, with all their breathtaking vistas, are vast repositories of such silent tragedies. They are spaces where the line between awe and terror is razor thin, and where the echoes of those who vanish remind us of the unfathomable depths of the wild.